There are many variables of making restoration be successful. Ultimately, we think we've gotten there just by growing the seed, but as important is how we get that seed in the ground. And it has to do with the time you plant, how you plant, what you plant it with.
This essentially fosters the culmination of the effort of seed collection, seed propagation, seed cleaning and processing, and site preparation.
We kind of have a hierarchy of how we like to seed put onto a site. Seed drill is our preferred method in order to place the seed exactly where we want it.
Today we're seeding blue bunch wheatgrass, bottlebrush squirreltail, sandberg bluegrass, and prairie June grass. This is on some conservation land we're doing a seeding on to establish native habitats for wildlife species. Native seeds have got a lot of diversity in the seed, and so it's difficult to get it to go through a conventional planter. There's 3 different boxes on these drills. All 3 different boxes, we can do 3 different types of situations. We can meet just about any challenge. Well, I hate to say that. We do have challenges. With this drill configuration and tractor, we can do between 75 and 100 acres per day, depending on the terrain. If we have to go around a lot of rocks or big sagebrush. Not terribly fancy, but when you're out here in, you might say, wildland environments, it's what it takes to get the job done. On these drills, this is called a disc opener, and that cuts a slot here for the seed to fall into. You have to have a little slot to give yourself some exposed dirt. The seed drops down, and those little press wheels push the soil around the seed. This is the critical element of soil-seed contact. We control the depth of how deep the seed goes in the ground with these depth bends. The depth is mostly determined by the site.
Desire is to see seed-soil contact and planting things at the appropriate depths so they have the moisture and the soil that they need to really establish themselves.
This is like your bicycle. This is to derail your system, and so you can adjust your feed rate so that you get your pounds per acre very accurate, and it stays there. The Truax drills, they have a picker wheel metering system so that you get a pretty accurate distribution of your seed and planting depth. There's a gamut of preparation process. This we just mowed. There was pretty sparse stuff, as you can see out here, and so we just came in, gave it a haircut, and moved on.
As far as seed preparation, the competition and preparing those seed beds is a major thing. Cheatgrass is one of the main issues that we deal with in the western United States, and those annual species can really hinder the establishment of our seeded perennial species.
You got to have the native community in place and have it at various stages of successful establishment before it does support the wildlife populations. This bare ground is not too attractive to the wildlife at this point, but give it a few years and we'll definitely have good wildlife utilization.
What I found from 25 years of doing this is the first hour and a half sets the pace for the day. So you either do it right and you have a good day, or you don't do it right and it ends up being a day of confusion. So in the wintertime, requires a lot of extra effort because we can't take off the frost on the wings, we can't take off the frost on the windshield, and nothing likes to start when it's below about 25 degrees. So we have to put heaters in the cowlings, keep the fuel control units warm. That's kind of what we're doing right now, is waking everything up. Looks like we have a good day to fly though. We're supposed to be improving stabilization and resiliency in native species in the desert. We help reduce the threat of wildfire, and I think we help spruce up the habitat for the species that are dependent on it to live after a fire. So number 1's off the ground, number 2's picking up his first load, number 3's in the pattern on his dry flight, number 4's off the ground on his dry flight, and now we're getting in a flow. So all we are is seed transportation specialists through multiple modes of action, ending in the airplane and the seed in free fall.
Headed toward the range. Okay, I see your seed.
On this particular location, we're going to see about 22,000 acres with 4 airplanes, 2 separate load systems, a ground crew of about 6 to 8 people, and 4 pilots. We could do this particular job in around 6 days. And of course, that's all weather dependent. We do have to be able to see the ground, so it can't be snowing, can't be cloudy, can't be foggy. So we're looking for days like this.
That was about 2,000 pounds of seed.
In any of these bags that you see here, there's generally anywhere between 8 and probably 14 species per mix.
All of the seed is bought during the BLM seed buys. The seed is kind of chosen for the soil types and the types of vegetation communities that were there, but we also try to pair that with the type of wildlife that we're kind of looking at. So for example, if we're in an area that has a lot of sage grouse, we're looking for a lot of species that are like forbs and stuff that sage grouse really rely on that, versus if it's more like big game like elk and mule deer, we'll be looking at slightly different species. When we do our seed mixes, we also try to plan for like different type of conditions because we don't know what the weather is going to do the year that we put the seed down. Planning is really hard. So for the disturbances, it's super hard. When the fires start burning, the fire season, which is, late June and go into like November sometimes. So we just kind of have to look at what's coming down and then we just start planning as it goes along. It's pretty mountainous, and so like most of the time like drill seeding just in these types of conditions isn't really an option because it's just the terrain just isn't favorable.
If it's too rough to run equipment over, it's almost always aerially applied through an aircraft, either fixed wing or helicopter. They send that seed out over the landscape to hopefully find a site that it will establish in. The con is you have to put more seed down. You don't get that soil contact, and the likelihood of finding that microsite is not as good.
We're dropping it on top. The germination rates are less than drilling it. So it's good to have snow because it's going to help hold the seed. If it blows, because it's no good if we put seed on dirt and then there's a 50-mile-an-hour wind, a lot of the lighter species will blow. We want it to stay on the fire. Generally in the sunshine, it will melt in, create a little pocket, and then when it snows again on top of it in the spring with the snow melt, that provides the moisture for germination, and of course, the softer the soil, the muddier it is, the better seed to soil contact you're going to have because the seed's going to help sink into the soil. There's a lot of seed that goes out, and it needs to. There's a lot of species that rely on this. There's a lot of local communities that rely on this.
Today we're working in Farmington Bay Waterfowl Management Area as well as the sovereign lands of Great Salt Lake. We're trying to remove Phragmites so that we can convey more water to Great Salt Lake for the sake of the whole ecosystem, so that we can restore really, really important migratory bird habitat. We're here to disc and seed, native seed. The main two species we're seeding today are inland saltgrass and alkali bulrush. To get our seeding accomplished today, we use two Marshmaster tractors. They're basically like an amphibious tank. It can float on water, drive through deep water, and drive on dry land as well. They don't have suspension. It makes for a really rough ride. We pull a disc to create microtopography to help mitigate fluctuating water levels.
So once you create that microtopography with this disking equipment, then you can go out and seed right behind it. And so they'll go around with the disker and they'll create these rows, and then they'll come through with the second Marshmaster that will have a big broadcast seeder on the back. And they'll basically open up the broadcast seeder in the areas where they think they'll have high success. And then there may be some areas where either the water levels are too deep or it looks too dry, or there may still be too much invasive Phragmites where it just is not worth their efforts to sow the seeds.
We had a lot of challenges leading up to make this seeding happen. We're trying to time the seeding perfectly with water levels, and that is fluctuating day by day. We're coordinating two large pieces of equipment coming from two different locations, a bunch of Department of Natural Resources employees that have very busy schedules, and all that needs to come together on days that have the right water levels. And in addition, we're putting the seed on the ground after we remove invasive Phragmites, and that's an ongoing effort. We may have an area that's open and perfect for seeding and it looks good and we plan on it, and then we get out there and it's been reinvaded. It's trying to hit a moving target.
Diversity in and of itself is often a restoration goal, right? We want to be conserving biodiversity, we want to be restoring biodiversity. That diversity is really important because it ensures that wetlands are providing habitat for wildlife, helping to process nutrients, helping to purify our air. All of those things are super important.
My hope is that if I come back to this place 30 years from now, we see a great diversity of plants and a great diversity of birds and a lot of water out here.
I am Kenneth Pete Jr. Most people call me KW. So right now we're on the Duck Valley Indian Reservation. My role here is to help the tribe grow plants. And I grew up here and went to college at University of Idaho, and I was lucky enough to return home. At our greenhouses, we could use them in multiple ways. We grow native seedlings for mining restoration or fire restoration, or even city parks. We have space for vegetables to sell to the community. We're 100 miles from any major city, so having some food security is always good. This year we grew 100,000 sagebrush seedlings. Usually all of our seedlings just go for 1 year. We also like to have a really solid root system, which I think is the most important part, especially in our high desert environments where water's not always necessarily available. Our primary species we grow is Wyoming big sagebrush.
This machine's called a precision needle feeder. They're a little spendy, but I think that they really help us with sowing seeds so we don't oversow, so that saves seed and saves us money and makes everything a little more accurate. So tiny seeds, we have tiny needles to pick them up. And each time it goes down, it picks up maybe 3 to 4 seeds, maybe a little more. We want to make sure that we're getting as many cells filled as we can. We want these blocks at capacity to maximize our growing space.
Nursery, in the terms of restoration, you're taking these plants, instead of getting their start in nature, where nature can be harsh and very unforgiving, you're giving them a chance, you're providing an optimal environment to be able to germinate the plants and care for them in those early establishment phases.
With the seedling, you're actually out there planting it and you know where it's going. You're putting it in a good spot where it has best chance of survival.
There's advantages and disadvantages like everything to that. The scale at which you can do that is reduced dramatically just because of the labor involvement. But that's where seeding will always have that advantage, is that you can just cover so much, but you need a lot more seed to do it. As far as transplanting, success rates are typically higher. So if you have a species that is a high priority that you don't have very much seed for, transplanting becomes a very viable option.
So our seed mostly comes from the BLM seed warehouses right now, and we work with Lucky Peak Nursery. They have a really good seed cleaning program there.
We grow between 3 to 4 million seedlings every year, and then land managers typically will plant between 200 to 300 plants per acre. So if you're trying to get an average, that'll be about 16,000 acres that are restored from our nursery alone.
Limation. So the big parts, we slice it, I don't know, just little chunks, and then we hang it up and dry it, and then just store it forever. And then as far as like medicinal use, we use it as a tea, or put it over ashes and kind of inhale it, like a smoke almost. Nice. We call it doza.
As a tribal nursery specialist, I like to go visit the folks that I've gotten to know over the years and see what they're doing, and try and help troubleshoot some of the problems or the questions that they have.
When I was at University of Idaho in college, I took a class with Jeremy.
The class was called Indigenous Culture and Ecology, and we were trying to cover the intersection of indigenous culture and land management and Western science.
Jeremy's still a big mentor to me if I need any advice. Figuring out why something's not growing well somewhere, or getting some growing protocols.
So I wrapped him into the folds of the Intertribal Nursery Council. One of the things that KW has been doing here is integrating multiple levels, restoration levels. They've got some food growing in here which can be distributed to the community. This greenhouse is tied to a school.
Seems like when we hire these students, they bring their friends down and they just start volunteering with us next. Works out pretty well. You gotta go crazy on it. We hire high school students year-round. With our program working with native seeds, we could show them how to collect and how to store seeds so that there's always going to be native plants available for them to use and for their kids to use. So we teach them about how these native plants are important and how they serve a role in our ecosystem and why we're growing them. Because, you know, people look out in the landscape and see sagebrush and think that we don't need sagebrush grown. But then I think it really hit hard when we had a fire go right in our backyard. All that came back is just grasses, and not necessarily native grasses. There's a lot of cheatgrass up there. That's where some of our medicinal plants are. We're not seeing our wildlife in as much as like the areas that haven't burned. I think pretty much all the sagebrush he said is pretty much came from our nursery here. And flowering, so they're potentially producing some more seedlings out here. These do look really good. We're at Table Rock in Boise, Idaho, that the city owns. It had burned in 2016, caused by fireworks, so a fire that could have been avoided.
In 2017, we were contacted by the city of Boise looking for some seedlings to help restore the Table Rock area, and we had some sagebrush that kind of fit the bill. So these areas are culturally significant for our tribes too. They used to come up here and hunt. It's one of the areas that we would probably still be inhabiting if we weren't pushed out in the middle of nowhere in Duck Valley where we are now. Returning here now, these seedlings are 5 or 6 years old and they're looking really well. And I always like to return to any restoration site or know exactly where our plants are going and be able to go visit them, because I want to be able to produce quality seedlings. I know the tribe likes to have that status of being a trusted source of native plant materials.
Native plants are also first foods, which goes back to the historical land management practice. These are the plants that kept us alive on the landscape. Used for restoration, used for food, used for culture.
So I use these plants. I just want to be able to produce as much native plants as possible and make sure that my kids are able to go utilize them the same way I have.